Yes, hello, welcome everybody. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, and I'm back again today with another one of my OP Kit retrospectives. And in today's video, I'm going to take a look at the Teen Titans set. That's right. Now, discerning viewers who've been following this series will say, hang on a minute, Chris, in the very first installment, you said you were going to be taking the OP kits in chronological order, but this isn't chronological order. You've missed a couple of sets out, and you'd be right. Okay, hands up. I concede. I've skipped two sets here. Before the Teen Titans set, we had the Justice League Trinity War set, and we had a trio of D&D sets. However, I'm working on a couple of things to bring those to life a little bit more. The D&D set, I don't have a great deal of knowledge in that space, so I'm looking at a way of bringing that to life for you, and there's some scheduling involved, which may indicate what direction I'm going in on that. And the Justice League set, because it's such a big set of 12 cards, I'm just going to approach that in a little bit of a different way, and hopefully you'll enjoy that, but it's taking a bit of time on editing and whatnot. So keen to get a DC set covered, because they've all been Marvel so far, and so I've jumped ahead a little bit, and today I'm going to talk about the Teen Titans set. Now, before I go any further, if you're new around these parts and you don't know what I'm talking about when I say an OP kit or an OP kit retrospective, let's just give you a quick bit of context on that. So WizKids through the years have produced what are called organised play kits, and these are small sets of promo cards that were designed for distribution to local gaming stores so that they could use them as promotional items and prize cards to give away at their local level events. There's been a number over the years, and these OP kit retrospectives are me going back and retreading these OP kits, but taking a look at them not just in terms of their game text for the game, but also from the perspective through the lens of the comic book lore that have influenced them and the reason why they may be the inspiration for an OP kit, why they should be celebrated as promo cards. So there you go, there's the context and everything. And also, before I go a little bit further, I just want to take a moment to say thank you very much to all those who've taken the time to subscribe to the channel, give us a like when they watch the videos, and take the time to comment and get into conversation with me. You're the best audience in the world. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you enjoyed this video, please do give me the thumbs up at the end. And if you're not already a subscriber, subscribe. But if you are already around, cheers. Thanks very much. I love it. Right, okay, well, without further ado then, let's get into talking about the kit. So, the Teen Titans set then, and as you can see here, it's made up of Raven, Starfire, and Robin. Raven, if memory serves me right, is the alt art version that was the participation prize, and then Starfire and Robin here have got their own game texts. And it's a particularly interesting set because up until this point, the comic book based OP kits have been driven by a famous or popular story arc that's taken place in the comics. And the Teen Titans here is the first set that isn't really inspired by a specific comic book story arc. It's just celebrating the team from a certain time in history. And this is very much inspired by the George Perez and Marv Wolfman run that took place in the 1980s, or 1980 to about 1985, 1986. And there's a reason why it is such a significant part of the DC narrative. Through the 70s, DC started to find themselves in a bit of trouble. Marvel was massively taking them over in terms of the kind of leaderboards, the readership leaderboards, even their unpopular titles like the Uncanny X-Men, which I know today seems like a strange thing to say, but back then it was kind of down there compared to the Captain Americas and the Spider-Mans and Thors of the world. They were knocking them out. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman was less popular. DC was seen to be much more like the kiddie run, and Marvel was much more hip and cool in terms of kind of 70s sensibilities and being very contemporary in the way that they're written, and DC was just like, we've got to do something about this. So towards the back end of the 70s, they brought in new management and they started to look at how they were going to approach it. In fact, there's even rumours that at one point DC, some management members in the old guard of DC had approached Marvel and talked about kind of selling up and just selling Marvel all the intellectual properties and the licenses, but that obviously never came to pass. And the new management, the first thing they did is they grabbed George Perez and Marv Wolfman, who were writing and drawing for Marvel at the time, and they said to them, right, well, what do you want to do? You can have your pick of characters, pick of titles, just help us reinvent. And Marv Wolfman and George Perez chose this kind of obscure junior team that was the Teen Titans, and said, we want to have a crack at that. And DC were like, well, we've got nothing to lose, off you go then, kind of thing. And from 1980 through to 1985, the Teen Titans was the most read, most popular DC title. And this is, kind of celebrating that, is celebrating that fact. The artwork here is particularly interesting. I'll just kind of, so you've got Raven there, Starfire here, and Robin there, just to cycle them around a little bit. The artwork is particularly interesting because it's not actually stripped directly from Teen Titans comic books. It is from a publication called the DC Comics Style Guide. It came out in around 1982, maybe 1983. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm in the weeds. And the artwork's by a guy called Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. You can see me glancing at my notes there to make sure I get that right. And it's particularly famous because the style guide was never commercially sold. It was like in a big ring binder and was given to artists and licensees of DC to use as a kind of source material to then go on and do their own artwork off the back of, or use it for licensed products, for example. And it's just incidentally, it's a highly sought after collector's item. The DC fans, DC collectors will pay a very pretty penny. So if you're in a thrift store or a charity shop and you find one in the corner, it was like a golden binder, like a yellow golden binder, and it had these sort of all in poses and gave a bit of background and kind of outfit descriptions so that artists and licensees could use it to produce their own work. And so the artwork here is quite interesting because they've chosen not to use it from the Teen Titans comic, but they've taken it from the style guide, the DC style guide. So let's dive into the cards a little bit, shall we? Okay, then the first card then, and this is actually number 1 of the set. He says, just glancing down to check the numbering on them, and this is Robin. Let's talk about Robin now. Robin's game text here. Apologies for the lighting, guys. I will figure this out. I keep fiddling and trying to get it right, but I'm not quite there yet. So Robin's game text reads: while Robin is active, if you have a Teen Titan die on an energy face in your reserve pool, during your main step, you may spin down a Teen Titans die to spin up a Teen Titans die. And then he's got a global here. Pay a shield once per turn. If you purchased a character die this turn, you may draw a die from your bag and add it to your prep area. And then he's got the Justice League Robin dice there as his main dice, and his subtitle is Teen Titans Team Leader, which is absolutely the case. He was the leader of the team. Robin is, I suppose, significant in this respect because of the 3 that they've chosen to use, he was the only kind of legacy character that was part of the Wolfman Perez Teen Titans team. Oh no, hang on, that might not be right. No, because I think Diana Troy Wonder Girl was... Anyway, of this set, anyway, he's the only legacy character there. This is the Dick Grayson Robin from the comic books. And the Teen Titans storyline through that early 80s period, for his kind of character development and character growth, is super important because it marks the journey from being Robin in the little, kind of green short pants through to becoming Nightwing and a superhero vigilante in his own right that was separate to Batman. Also very significant because we'll look at Starfire in a minute. One of the big parts of this being a kind of reinvention of the DC style and approach was his romance with Starfire. It was a bit risque. There was kind of shots of them together in bed, a bit of kind of late teens sex action going on. So their romance was a big part of it. There was the sort of teeny angsty stuff as he was starting to realise that he was in Batman's shadow and he needed to kind of break out and be his own man. So that was that kind of coming of age, character growth storyline. There was some very, very challenging storylines here that kind of tested him as a leader, as a team leader. One of the most famous ones, actually, I've got my trade paperback edition here of the Judas Contract, one of the most kind of probably the most famous story arcs from that Teen Titans run. Incidentally, this is a reprint from a couple of years ago. That's the only reprint since an 80s version at the back end of the 80s. So it's never been collected in trade paperback until this point. Just another kind of nerdy thing there. So I had to go out and pick up this particular story because I like to own the significant, famous storylines. You can see there on the front cover he's in his Nightwing gear rather than his on his Robin gear. So really significant storyline from that perspective, because of his romance with Starfire, because he's kind of becoming Nightwing, the kind of testing, challenging storylines. Oh, I was going to mention about the Judas contract, so really there's a character in there called Terra who joins the team. She's an invention of Marv Wolfman's and George Perez's. It turns out that she's a plant by their main foil, their main villain, which is Deathstroke, who is a big, very famous villain in the DC staple as a result of this period of time with the Teen Titans. And she is a plant. She's trying to bring the team down from within, because Deathstroke's got issues with them, all to do with, he blames them for the death of his son, and it's not storyline focused, this OP kit. So let me know if you want me to go into it one day, but kind of the test of Robin's leadership and his maturity through that period, because then Terra betrays them, and she doesn't get a redemption arc. She just betrays them. She's just a nut job. She just, actually, incidentally, again, about that kind of mature element of the title, I'm kind of all over the place on this one. Sorry, I apologise for being a bit scattershot. It's not, because it's not narratively tied, it's hard to kind of lay this out. But Terra was... there was a really controversial sexual relationship between Terra and Deathstroke. She was like a 16-year-old girl. She smoked, and she was hanging around in these kind of really, loads of legs and boobs everywhere while she was hanging out with Deathstroke, implying that, there'd been a bit of slap and tickle going on. You wouldn't find a storyline of that nature in comic books or in anything really now. But so, it kind of had that darker tone, and Robin's development as a character from, like I say, the little kind of short pants wearing sidekick of Batman to becoming his own man as Nightwing, and this kind of grittier, more angsty tone coming in, and how it was influencing a character that seemed to be, they were still living with the legacy of the Adam West stuff. You know what I mean? His name's Dick Grayson, for God's sake. And they were still kind of living with the legacy of that kind of what's the word? That Boy Scout kind of Robin. Gee shucks, Batman. Holy whatever stuff, So a really interesting card. Really interesting that they've chosen this one as the legacy character to include in the OP kit in this celebration. And of course, the game text is very thematic, because as the Teen Titans team leader, I think his game text sort of reflects that leadership position, and kind of directing and organising the team, and the global a bit of ramp kind of helps them get some momentum and some inspiration, and just a nice thematic game text. So a really, really interesting card there, and really speaks to what was kind of going on with the title at the time. Okay, right, let's move on to the next card. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about Raven here. There we go. Let's just make sure she's not under that spotlight. This is a reprint. Rachel Roth is in the War of Light set, and she's a 3-cost mask, and the game text reads, while Raven is active, if another Teen Titan character dies KO'd, you may re-roll that die. If it is a character face, return it to play. This doesn't count as fielding that die. And then she's got the standard War of Light dice stats there. So Raven, in fact, all the Raven cards from War of Light, and this one in particular, really, really powerful, especially if you're kind of single affiliating a Teen Titans team. Obviously, the rare Azeroth Mentrion Zentros was particularly important in the story of Dice Masters as a control card. But Raven, a very significant character. She was one of the new kind of creations for this revamped, reinvented version of the team, and she is significant because she's actually the driving force for bringing the team together. So Raven is the daughter of the demon Trigon, and a human mother who was part of a kind of mystical Trigon demon worshipping cult thing. And her powers, she's an empath and a sorceress. So she kind of, she's tuned into the emotional reaction. She can do stuff with a cloak, like make people disappear into these like dark sorcerous realms and things. And lots of they played around with her power set a great deal. And she brought the team together. She approached the Justice League. Her father, she was very aware, was about to get up to some nefarious, demonic, no good things, and so she went to the Justice League for help, but Zatanna there was like, oh, something's not right with this chick, which she was right to some degree, because she's obviously the daughter of Trigon and kind of possesses some of his evil powers. So when the Justice League refused to help her, or kind of dismissed her, again, which is an important part of that whole kind of reinvention, this sort of, their dismissal, the old guard sort of dismissing her, so she goes and gets a new team together, and she started to bring the, so she goes and visits Robin and says, I'm going to need your help, and there's things about to happen, and I'm going to need you, and then she goes to Beast Boy, and blah, 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 and kind of gathers the team together, so she's the driving force. And even though Robin is the team leader, probably because of his kind of strategic experience, having as Batman's sidekick, she's the one who kind of brought them all together. But a really interesting character, and I can understand why she's one to celebrate in this OP kit as part of recognising the importance of this period of the Teen Titans history and the wider history of DC, because she's the one that brought them all together. And there was loads of storylines through that kind of 5-6 year run that centered around her. So that battle with her father, and then there was a storyline where her demonic kind of side was coming through. There was some stuff where, in fact, Robin and Starfire nearly got married at one point, and then she kind of interrupted. And there was also a bit of a weird love triangle thing, because she sort of had a bit of a thing for Robin, but it wasn't ever consummated, because he was with Starfire. But it was, again, that kind of teeny, late teeny angst stuff, making the storyline a bit sexier. She had a Beast Boy had a bit of a thing for her, and there was a bit of a flirtation there. So it was all very interesting from that point of view. But yeah, I can absolutely see why this is a character they included in the set, because he's just super significant. So there you go. There's Raven. Okay then, so the last one from the set here, we've got Starfire. Powerful friend, 4-cost bolt, and she reads, when fielded, KO target villain. If you have at least 3 active Titans, that villain can't use regenerate. And she's using the Warlight dice there for Starfire. Not the most mind-blowing of game texts, and I think, if you were playing a Titans team, there's better Starfires from the Warlight set that you'd probably use. I don't know how kind of thematic it is. I suppose the fact that the villain can't regenerate has got something to do with their kind of almighty kind of flamey powers there. Another controversial character here. She was a new creation for for this reinvention of the title. She is a princess from the planet Tamaran. Again, I've only ever read it. I don't really know how it's pronounced, so I'm going to say Tamaran. And she had a very complicated family history. They were a peaceful planet, but then they ended up in a war. Well, I can't remember off the top of my head who they're in a war against. And her sister betrayed the family in the realm to fight for the side of their opponents, because she had kind of these feelings of jealousy around Starfire as they were growing up. And so she enslaved Starfire, and Starfire eventually managed to escape, and she fled to Earth to hide from her sister, and that's how she ended up on Earth. She's definitely, in terms of the title, there's lots of kind of fish out of water style storylines for her, just learning and trying to understand human culture and what we're all about. They have, from her planet, they have very different views around relationships and love and interactions, and so she kind of brings, there's a bit of light relief, but also some serious storylines as well, where she's kind of saying, I don't really understand what's happening here and why this is happening, and they have to kind of explain to her why things are happening. She's like, well, that just doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Why would they behave that way, or why would that person do that to this other person? So yeah, just really interesting character from that kind of fish out of water. She ends up becoming a model, and that's her job. So lots of, you can see from the outfit there, again, that kind of giving it a sexier edge. There was lots of stuff with like her and Raven and Dick Grayson hanging out by the side of the pool at Titans Towers, and she's in these skimpy bikinis and stuff. And again, I'll repeat myself. I mentioned the relationship that she had with Dick Grayson and kind of the shots of them in bed together and stuff. So she was definitely part of that kind of sexying up the title and giving it a bit more of a kind of, I don't know, just a kind of more mature edge, and a hipper kind of edge. And while controversial from the sense of the kind of more conservative comic book readers, it was definitely a big part to play in kind of dragging that that readership who were in with Marvel and looking at that as the cooler kind of hipper one to go, oh, there's something a bit more eye-catching over here. Certainly got the the young teenage lads readership over to them as well. So she's a really interesting character. Again, just like Raven, they used her as a kind of a central protagonist or driving force behind a number of the storylines that took place within the Teen Titans. Her sister arrives on Earth, people are trying to get her and bring her back to the planet Tamaran and all that kind of good stuff. So a big driving force behind some of those storylines there, but definitely significant in the sense of her fish out of water kind of story arcs and how she didn't understand human culture and perhaps revealed some of the kind of hypocrisies or the more kind of violent or darker sides of our nature that she couldn't just get her head around. And also, like I say, bringing that sexy edge in. So yeah, there you go, Starfire. So there we are then, ladies and gents. A bit of a shorter, perhaps punchier OP Kit retrospective there. As I say, it was tough for me to put it together, really. When I was preparing to make this video, I was like, well, whereas the videos in the past, I've started at the beginning of a story and kind of worked my way through the story. Or, if it had been based on the Judas contract, I could have flashed stuff up on the screen there to walk you through the storyline and what's going on. But it was a bit trickier there. But as a DC fanboy, I was always very aware of the significance. They're quite fashionable now. They've obviously had the successful Netflix adaptation of the storyline, which to some degree follows some of the more famous, like the Judas contract, for example, is a big influencing factor on the second season of the Titans TV show, and the early Teen Titans coming together as a teen storyline that's driven by Raven is a big influencing factor on season 1, and also there's the new 52 animated movie, the Teen Titans movie, which again draws very heavily from that Raven story from the early days, but that's not really what this set was all about. I think this set was, I believe that this, from the artwork that they've chosen, from the style guide and from the characters they've chosen, that this was more about a celebration of the fact that this was a very significant title in the history of DC Comics. It's the title that saved it. The sales numbers and the renewed interest in DC as a publisher as a result of what Marv Wolfman and George Perez did with the Teen Titans, it can't be underplayed. It really can't be underplayed at all. And so I think this is more of a celebration of their importance and an acknowledgement of their importance rather than a kind of storyline focused OP Kit that we'd seen up until this point. And incidentally, in terms of its importance, George Perez and Marv Wolfman were so successful with their work on the Teen Titans that when it came to really super revamping the DC universe with the Crisis on Infinite Earths, the DC handed them the central role as the story runners for the Crisis on Infinite Earths maxi series and the kind of reconfiguring of this kind of multiverse mess that was going on with DC. But also a big part of that was kind of firmly stamping this new tone, this new approach, this new style to DC. And I've got to admit, as a DC fan over the years, one of the things I've always appreciated about DC was that it did sometimes have a bit of a darker tone than Marvel. And even though Marvel was quite hip, it was a bit camp sometimes. And I think in the 90s, when I started reading DC Comics and then started diving back into the history of it, the Teen Titans, this kind of angstier, darker, grittier tone to it, influenced a lot of went forward there. Batman kind of spun back round to becoming the OG kind of Dark Knight style Batman and shook off the legacy of Adam West. Superman started to get a bit edgier in some respects, and obviously that drove towards things like the Death of Superman storyline. Wonder Woman, again, kind of turned its back on the kind of bondagey weird stuff, and she became a much more kind of significant warrior princess character and stuff. When I was reading it in the 90s, and the Teen Titans from the early 80s into the mid 80s was a big influencing factor on that. So there you go. Okay, well, I hope you found this interesting, this little walk through the OP Kit and looking at it through the lens of its source material. If you did, please do take the time to give us a thumbs up. Let us know in the comments below, have you read the 80s Perez, Wolfman Teen Titans? Were you aware of how significant it was? Is it something you might dive into? Have you made single affiliation teams using any of these cards? Let us know in the comments below. I'll be back with OP Kit, so depending on how that scheduling goes, I'll bounce back and revisit the two I've skipped, or maybe I'll carry on until I can get those sorted out for you in the meantime. But certainly on the right hand side of the screen now, the YouTube algorithm is going to be suggesting a couple of videos that it thinks you might like, so if you've got a couple of minutes, please do hang around and give them a try, and I'll catch you on a video, on a podcast, or on BritRoller6.com sometime soon. Okay, thanks guys.